So I started God Eater 2 Rage Burst a while ago. I beat the first game several months ago, but I didn't want to jump directly into this one yet, but now is the time. Last week I finally took the plunge, and I know this series is called First Few Hours, but the first game took me around 72 hours to finish, and they say this one isn't any shorter. So I allotted myself 7 hours to form my first impressions this time, and I'm happy to say that I like what I've seen so far. Gameplay wise, it doesn't feel too different from the first one, and that's a good thing. For anyone who doesn't know, God Eater Resurrection is actually slightly newer than 2 Rage Burst. Resurrection was a remake of the first game in 2's engine, so if that was your introduction into the series, you'll feel right at home when you start up this game. The command center, Friar, feels very similar to the Den from the first game. Most of the menus look the same. Aragami that you encountered from the first game still have the same weaknesses. Like I said, if you played the first one, you'll slide into this one quite easily. But weapons, I didn't play any version of the first game. Can I still jump into this one anyway? I think so. Both games take place in the same world, but the two stories don't seem to be intertwined that much. The game takes place a few years after God Eater 1. The Far East branch does occasionally come up in conversation, and Alyssa has shown up on a couple of missions, but for the most part it's been subtle stuff. They didn't delve too deep into any specifics from the last game. There is a new cast of characters and the spotlight does seem to be fixed on them, so if you want to jump directly into this one, you'll probably be fine. The new characters don't seem to know any more about the previous game than you would anyway. Just like last time, you make your own protagonist. Now this isn't the same person from the first game, mind you, and it opens with him or her joining Blood, a special division within Fenrir consisting of elite God Eaters. You remember how being a new type in the first game was so rare and special? You could switch between a gun and a melee weapon at will, while most characters were stuck with one or the other, and only a handful of other characters ended up with this ability? Yeah, that doesn't mean much now. Put simply, the God Eaters who end up forming the Blood unit are new types. Not only can they morph their weapon when the situation calls for it, but they also have this thing called a blood power, and awakening this blood power allows them to use blood arts, which I'll talk more about later. So far, the pacing seems to be a little better than the first game, at least initially. They waste no time in introducing you to your new teammates. Fran is the Hibari of this game. She runs the counter, and that's where you'll take your missions from. Rachel and Leia both remind me of Sakaki from the last game. They're kind of the brains of the operation. Julius is the Lindo of this game. He's the captain and also takes on the role of an older brother somewhat. He's kind of like the glue that holds everyone together. Nana and Romeo both remind me of Coda. They're very bright, cheery, carefree, and full of energy. Gilbert reminds me of Soma, very reserved and kind of sticks to himself. And Shiel is kind of odd. She's very prim and proper, kind of a perfectionist. The game does explain why, it just kind of caught me off guard at first.
Vice Captain, there is something I wish to ask of you. Please be my friend.
There's one more character, this guy named Grem, and, well, he's not nearly as nice as the other characters.
Hey, Nana, getting kind of close there. Oh, so sorry about it.
What are you kids doing? Miss Yuno, I apologize for this behavior.
Please, it's fine.
Careful there, you three. You shouldn't be horsing around in the lobby. I know you don't want to disturb our important guests.
Right. Sorry, Dr. Leia. It won't happen again.
My apologies for those rude children. I am ashamed. They're really only good for fighting, you know.
But regardless, I do love the new cast so far. Rage Burst boasts the same weapon choices from Resurrection. Initially, 2 was the first game to introduce the hammer, spear, and scythe, but since Resurrection was a remake, you had all 6 blades to use from the get-go. Just like in the last game, there are 3 ways to damage an Aragami: slashing, crushing, or piercing, and most of the different blades and guns specialize in 1 or 2 of these damage types. Unlike the last game, you cannot use Predator styles. These characters use blood arts instead, and blood arts are essentially combo modifiers. Each weapon has its own arts that modify either its light attacks, heavy attacks, or unique moves. So for example, one of the first blood arts you learn for the short sword allows you to deal extra elemental damage. The Buster has a blood art that enhances the charge crush. You can enhance the long sword's zero stance to power up your next attack, and the list goes on. You learn new blood arts pretty quickly and they do level up. I think you get EXP every time you do melee damage. It takes way longer to level up one than it does to unlock a new one, but it does spice up the combat quite a bit. They're pretty fun. My only gripe with it is the fact that you can only equip one at a time. I feel like you should have at least been able to equip a light attack, a heavy attack, and a unique move. Maybe they figured you'd be too overpowered if you could equip more than one. But your teammates do have blood arts too, but it does look like each member unlocks theirs as the story progresses. Julius had his all along, and I just unlocked Shields a while ago. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the game so far. I'm only just now getting into the meat and potatoes of the story, but I want to save that for my in-depth review. As of now, it's pretty good. So far I like it more than the first one, but I've only completed a fraction of the game, so I guess we'll see.